steps from the Capitol in Cheyenne with reporters in your hometown. These are the top stories from the Cowboy State Daily News Center.
It's time to take a look at what's happening around Wyoming for Tuesday, January 13th. I'm Mac Watson. Wyoming Superintendent of Public Instruction Megan Dagenfelder on Monday announced she is running for governor. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that Dagenfelder had been strongly considering the move and had received an endorsement from President Trump urging her to run last week.
We do have 3 years of political leadership by Dagenfelder in this state where she's led our public education system. And during that time, she has back school choice. She has voted in favor of wind leasing, saying that's free market approach by Wyoming. She really ran in part on a campaign of blocking sexually explicit books in school libraries or helping schools deal with that on their own, which she did end up doing. She did end up issuing guidance to school districts so that they could deal with that issue.
The Republican incumbent, Governor Mark Gordon, is at the end of his 2-term limit this year. The state has court history indicating he could get the limit overturned, but not without a legal challenge. Gordon has not announced his political intentions for the 2026 election. Wyoming's senior U.S. Senator announced Monday morning that he's endorsing U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman to serve alongside with him in the upper chamber. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that Senator Barrasso says Hageman is going to be terrific in the U.S. Senate. But why such an early endorsement?
I asked him, I was like, this is early. We've not had, on the state side, we've not had the legislative session yet. She doesn't really have an opponent yet. No one else has declared. Why are you so early? I asked him that point blank, and he said, look, I want to get her out there as a front runner to get this race in the bag so I can focus on trickier cases and hold the Republican majority in the Senate.
Senator John Barrasso's current counterpart in the upper chamber of Congress is Senator Cynthia Lummis, who announced December 19th that she is not seeking to run for a second 6-year term this year. Hageman, Wyoming's lone delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives, announced 4 days later that she will run to fill Lummis's seat. A snowmobiler in the Wyoming Backcountry southeast of Afton died Sunday after he and another rider triggered an avalanche that buried him about 2 feet below the surface and under his snowmobile. Cowboy State Daily's Kate Meadows reports that despite having an airbag on his snowmobile, Nicholas Bringquist of Springville, Utah, was still trapped beneath the avalanche.
The airbag is not attached to the snowmobile. It's a piece of equipment that a rider carries, especially when in the backcountry. It is supposed to keep the rider above the surface to ride out the avalanche to keep them from getting buried. But in this case, it did not work that way. The snowmobiler was trapped under about 2 feet of snow underneath his snowmobile. It's the snow, then his snowmobile, then him. And his partner pulled him out and attempted to perform CPR, but it was, again, unsuccessful.
Frank Karras, director of the Bridger Teton Avalanche Center, tells Cowboy State Daily that the 2 snowmobilers were on a steep, ungroomed slope when the avalanche was triggered at about 8,800 feet of elevation and extremely avalanche prone. The Wyoming Legislative Committee's crafting a preliminary state budget voted Monday to deny the governor's almost $112 million recommendation to give state employees raises. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the debate is not over.
So what the Judiciary Committee is doing this week is the markup. So the budget is like a train that people are putting stuff on and taking stuff off of as it winds toward the station. And the first iteration of that train is the governor's version of it, the governor's recommendation. And so he sent that into the Legislative Committee, Joint Appropriations, which on Monday was like, we don't want this $111.8 million for raises for all state employees across the enterprise. We're going to pull that out. They later did go in and put in $5 million for some state troopers and road maintenance people, including snowplow drivers. But the train's next stop is the state legislature.
Representative Trey Sherwood of Laramie says wages have not kept pace with inflation, pointing to economic data that the state's total wage growth in the past decade was 27.6% compared to the private sector's 37.2%. I'll be back with more news from Cowboy State Daily right after this.
Did you know it's illegal to dig or excavate without knowing what's below? This is Jan Warren, Executive Director for One Call of Wyoming. We will be hosting workshops around the state to educate homeowners, realtors, landscapers, underground facility owners, and excavators on the state law, industry best practices when it comes to planting a tree, building a fence, or any other excavation project you have planned. Join us for a free breakfast, get your questions answered, and learn how One Call of Wyoming is here to help. Go to onecallofwyoming.com and register today.
Cowboy State Daily News continues now. The Trump administration's EPA has finalized its rejection of closing a coal-fired plant in Colorado, drawing sharp criticism from environmental and health groups. Cowboy State Daily's David Madison reports that the decision extends the life of a plant that burns Wyoming coal.
Administrator Cyrus Western, who's a former Sheridan legislator, he runs the office for the EPA out of Denver, looks over about 8 states, I think. He says this is just another way that the Trump administration is trying to end the war on coal, that he says it's a false choice that we've been presented, that you can have public health or you can have electricity generated by coal. That's a very controversial position to take. In Colorado, environmental groups really came out of the woodwork in protest. Administrator Western says he's carrying out the mandate he's received from the Trump administration and clashing with Colorado officials over that.
At the heart of the decision is the Ray D. Nixon power plant, which serves Colorado Springs and has burned Wyoming Powder River Basin coal since 2003. The woman accused of absconding with her son from Wyoming, then killing the 11-month-old when authorities caught up with her in New Mexico, wants out of jail. But Cowboy State Daily's Jen Coker reports that 35-year-old Madeline Daly will remain locked up as she faces a first-degree murder charge.
It was a custody hearing Monday afternoon in Grant County to determine whether she would remain incarcerated leading up to her criminal proceedings, which are still in process. And the judge said, absolutely not. We are keeping you in jail. And her attorney was inaudible, unfortunately, on the meeting, so it was unclear what he was saying, what argument he was making. But the DA countered by saying these charges are egregious and he fears for both her own safety as well as the safety of the stoners because she allegedly took the boy's life to keep him from visiting Jake Stoner, the biological father, and his family. That was her justification in taking his life.
Daly allegedly shot and killed her son back in December rather than ceding custody to the biological father in compliance with a court order when she was confronted by Grant County, New Mexico authorities in an RV park. A black bear has caused quite a stir in the Jackson area, spotted still awake and running around in January. Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that a local wildlife tour guide says it's not unheard of, but the unseasonably warm weather may have confused the bear about when bedtime is.
It's more like a juvenile subadult black bear was seen kind of running around the Jackson area recently, like as recently as last week. I talked to a guy who's a wilderness guide and a photographer there, and he got some good pictures of this bear on Christmas Eve. We've had a couple articles already about how the warm weather is affecting things, and it might be keeping some bears out longer than usual. And he said because this bear, it's not a cub, it's more like just left home age. And so since it probably just separated from its mother and it's this weird warm year, he said that might factor into why this particular bear is out running around so late.
Jeffrey Solieri told Cowboy State Daily that black bears and grizzlies typically separate from their mothers at around 2 to 3 years old. And that's today's news. Get your free digital subscription to Wyoming's only statewide newspaper by hitting that daily newsletter button at cowboystatedaily.com. And you can listen to this newscast each and every day by clicking subscribe on our YouTube channel or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening. I'm Mac Watson for Cowboy State Daily.